Did you know that the famous dance in Jailhouse Rock was created by a man who had never choreographed rock and roll before? Or that the iconic white jumpsuit Elvis wore in Viva Las Vegas's was a last-minute choice that almost didn't happen? What about the co-star who was genuinely terrified during a key musical number, and the director had to use clever tricks to hide it? The Elvis's movies were packed with musical scenes that felt like the ancestors of modern music videos. And inside these performances, hidden in plain sight, are details and stories that most people have never heard. They tell a different story about the films, the music, and the man himself. Number 25. Why does the Jailhouse Rock set look so unrealistic? The main set for the Jailhouse Rock dance number cost MGM Studios over $70,000 to build in 1957. That's more than $500,000 in today's money. Yet, it looks nothing like a real jail. The choreographer Alex Romero deliberately chose to have the fire pole installed even though it wasn't in the original script. And the song itself, written by Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, was penned in just a few hours after their publisher locked them in a hotel room and refused to let them out until it was done. The look of the Jailhouse Rock sequence wasn't an accident. It was a very specific choice made by the studio and the director, Richard Thorpe. They weren't trying to create a realistic prison. They were creating a stage. This was MGM in the 1950s, the home of the big splashy musical. They knew how to build sets that made performers look good. Think about the musicals of Gene Kelly or Fred Astaire. The sets were often abstract, minimalist, and designed purely to showcase the dancing. That's the tradition Jailhouse Rock came from. The set was built on Soundstage 27 at MGM. It was a huge space. The two-tiered jail block was designed by Randall Duell, an art director who had worked on classics like Singin' in the Rain. He understood space. The cells aren't really cells, they are frames. Each one acts like a little proscenium arch, focusing your attention on the dancers inside. The bars aren't meant to keep people in. They're meant to be part of the dance, something for the performers to grab onto, swing from, and interact with. The lighting was also crucial. It's stark and dramatic, with lots of shadows. This is a technique borrowed from film noir, another popular genre of the time. It creates a mood of toughness and rebellion, even though the set itself is a fantasy. The lighting isolates Elvis. When he starts to sing, the focus is entirely on him. The other dancers are often in silhouette or partial shadow until they join the main action. This wasn't lazy filmmaking. This was a deliberate choice to make Elvis the undeniable center of the universe. The color palette is also very controlled. The film was shot in black and white, which helps, but the costumes are all simple. The prisoners are in striped shirts and dark pants. Elvis is in the now iconic black jacket and pants. This uniformity makes the synchronized movements of the dancers more powerful. There are no distracting colors or patterns. It's all about the shapes they create with their bodies. The whole thing feels less like a movie scene and more like a piece of modern dance performed on a theater stage. MGM took what it knew about old school musicals and applied it to this new raw thing called rock and roll. The result was something that didn't look like anything else at the time. Number 24. Who really taught Elvis to dance like that? Most people assume Elvis just made up his dance moves on the spot, but the Jailhouse Rock routine was heavily choreographed. The man responsible was Alex Romero, a veteran MGM dancer and choreographer who had worked with stars like Sid Charisse and Howard Keel. Romero came from the world of classic Hollywood musicals. He didn't know anything about rock and roll. He was given the job because the studio's main choreographers, like Hermes Pan, who worked with Fred Astaire, wanted nothing to do with Elvis or his music. When Romero first met Elvis, he was unsure how to proceed. He listened to the song Jailhouse Rock and recognized it had a strong beat. But he didn't know what kind of moves to create, so he asked Elvis to show him what he would naturally do. Elvis got up and started moving, doing his signature leg shakes, swiveling his hips, and using his hands in that expressive way. Romero watched him closely. He didn't try to change Elvis's style. Instead, he decided to build the entire routine around it. Romero's genius was in taking Elvis's raw, improvisational energy and giving it structure. He was the architect of the dance. He designed the overall flow of the number from the moment Elvis slides down the pole to the big finish. He choreographed the movements for the other 24 male dancers, making sure they moved in a way that complemented Elvis without overshadowing him. He created the key moments, like the bit where the dancers fall to their knees in a wave, or when they use the jail cell bars as part of the routine. The collaboration was a two-way street. Elvis had ideas too. He was a quick study and loved to dance. He would watch old movies to get ideas. For Jailhouse Rock, he was told to watch Marlon Brando in The Wild One and James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause to capture the right rebellious attitude. He took that feeling and put it into his movements. The famous knee slide across the floor was something Elvis came up with during rehearsals. And Romero saw it, loved it, and worked it into the final routine. This process, where a classic Hollywood choreographer structured the raw talent of a rock and roll star, was unique. It created a hybrid style, had the precision and showmanship of an MGM musical, but it also had the dangerous, unpredictable energy of rock and roll. It's why the Jailhouse Rock sequence holds up so well. It's not just a guy dancing, it's a fully realized, story-driven piece of choreography that changed how music was presented on film. Number 23 was Anne Margaret, a better dancer than Elvis. In the movie Viva Las Vegas, released in 1964, Elvis Presley shares the screen with Anne Margaret. Their on-screen chemistry is legendary. A big part of that was their dancing. In musical numbers like Come On Everybody, they dance together with an energy that almost leaps off the screen. But when you watch closely, you can see something interesting. Anne Margaret was a professionally trained dancer. Elvis was a natural mover, and the film, directed by George Sidney, makes no attempt to hide that she might be the more technically skilled of the two. George Sidney had a history of directing big musicals at MGM, including Annie, Get Your Gun, and Showboat. He knew how to film a dance number, and he loved to use long takes, where the camera doesn't cut away for a long time. This technique forces the performers to be good. There's no hiding behind quick edits. In Come On Everybody, the camera follows Elvis and Anne Margaret as they move all over the stage and into the audience. You see their whole bodies head to toe for extended periods. This is where you can see the difference in their styles. Anne Margaret is precise. Her kicks are higher, her turns are sharper, she hits every beat perfectly. She was a professional who had been dancing since she was a child. And Elvis is looser, more instinctive. His famous moves are all there. The swiveling hips, the shaking legs. He has incredible charisma and rhythm. But he's not a technically trained dancer in the same way. He's a force of nature. She's a finely tuned instrument. The direction and choreography don't try to make Elvis look better than her. In fact, they celebrate the contrast. The choreographer David Winters created routines that allowed them both to shine. There are moments where she clearly leads the dance. She initiates a move and he follows. In some shots, the camera seems to favor her, framing her in a way that highlights her skill. This was unusual for an Elvis movie. Typically, the female co-star was there to support him, not to compete with him. The energy between them was real, both on and off screen. They had a brief, intense affair during the making of the film. That genuine connection translated directly into their performances. They are constantly trying to one-up each other in the dance numbers, but in a playful, flirtatious way. You know, it feels like a real dance battle. George Sidney encouraged this. He would often just let the cameras roll and capture their spontaneous interactions. So, was she a better dancer? Technically, yes. But the magic of Viva Las Vegas is that their two very different styles created something more exciting than either could have achieved alone. Number 22, why is there a random stuffed dog in GI Blueses? In the 1960 film GI Blueses, there's a scene where Elvis sings a lullaby called Big Bootses to a baby. The song is for the infant son of his friend. It's a sweet, gentle moment. But sitting right next to the baby's crib is a large, slightly goofy-looking stuffed dog. The dog does nothing. It's just there in a prominent position in the shot. It's a detail that seems random, but it was a deliberate inside joke placed there by the film's crew and Elvis himself. The dog was a reference to Colonel Tom Parker's famous use of merchandise. The Colonel was a master at marketing. When Elvis became a star, Parker licensed his image on everything imaginable: lipstick, guitars, pajamas, and especially stuffed animals. The most famous of these was the Hound Dog toy, a fluffy dog with sad eyes that sold by the millions. By placing a similar-looking stuffed dog in a key scene, the filmmakers were giving a subtle nod to the massive commercial enterprise that Elvis had become. It was also a way for Elvis to poke fun at his own image. G.I. Blues was his first film after returning from his 2-year stint in the Army. The studio, Paramount Pictures, and Colonel Parker were very careful about reintroducing him to the public. They wanted to present a cleaner, more wholesome Elvis. The film is full of lighthearted comedy and romance. The Big Boots' scene is the epitome of this new family-friendly image. He's not the rebellious rocker anymore. He's a gentle soldier singing to a baby. But the presence of the dog undercuts this just a little. It's a reminder of the rock and roll hound dog past. It connects the new clean-cut Elvis with the old controversial one. It's a small, quiet act of rebellion within a very safe and controlled film. It's a way of saying, yes, I'm playing this role, but don't forget who I really am. Elvis had a great sense of humor, and he was aware of the absurdity of his own fame. This little detail is a perfect example of that. The specific choice of a dog is also important. Elvis loved dogs. He owned many throughout his life. The Hound Dog song was one of his biggest early hits. The animal was intertwined with his public persona. So, for those in the know, the stuffed dog in G.I. Blues wasn't just a prop. It was a symbol of the entire Elvis phenomenon, from the music to the merchandise to the man's personal life. It's a small detail that tells a much bigger story about a star trying to navigate his own complicated image. Number 21. What makes the music in King Creole sound so different? The 1958 film King Creole is often considered Elvis's best movie. A big reason for that is the music. The songs and the way they were recorded sound grittier, more authentic, and more powerful than in many of his other films. This wasn't an accident. The entire musical production was handled differently for this movie, from the choice of songwriters to the musicians who played on the soundtrack. First, the songs were written by the legendary team of Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller. They had already written hits for Elvis like Hound Dog and Jailhouse Rock. They understood his voice and his style. For King Creole, they were asked to write a whole batch of songs that would fit the film's New Orleans setting and its dramatic film noir plot. They delivered songs like Trouble, Hard-Headed Woman, and the title track King Creole. These weren't the light, fluffy pop songs of his later movies. They had a bluesy, raw edge to them. Second, the recording sessions were unique. Instead of using Elvis's usual band, the studio brought in a group of seasoned jazz and Dixieland musicians from New Orleans. This included people like saxophonist T.J. Manny, Klein, and trombonist Warren Smith. These guys were pros who had been playing this kind of music their whole lives. They gave the soundtrack an authentic New Orleans flavor that you couldn't fake. You can hear it in the brass arrangements and the swinging rhythm section. The director, Michael Curtiz, also played a role. Curtiz was a veteran director who had made classics like Casablanca and Yankee Doodle Dandy. He was a serious filmmaker, and he treated King Creole like a serious drama, not just a vehicle for a pop star. He insisted that the music feel integrated into the story. He wanted the performances to feel live and real. As a result, many of the musical numbers were filmed with Elvis singing live on set rather than lip-syncing to a pre-recorded track. This was much more difficult to do, but it adds a level of energy and realism that is missing from many of his other films. You can really hear the difference in a song like Trouble. Elvis's vocal performance is aggressive and full of attitude. The band behind him is tight and powerful. The sound mix is clear and punchy. It doesn't sound like a typical Hollywood soundtrack recording. It sounds like a live band playing in a smoky club. This commitment to musical authenticity is what sets King Creole apart. It was a rare moment when the filmmakers, the musicians, and Elvis himself were all working together to create something that was more than just a pop movie. They were making a real musical drama. Number 20. How authentic was the Hawaiian wedding in Blue Hawaii? The final scene of the 1961 film Blue Hawaii features the wedding of Elvis's character, Chad Gates, to his girlfriend, Male Duvall. It's a lavish, romantic sequence set on a floating platform with the couple arriving in a flower-adorned, double-hulled canoe. The song Hawaiian Wedding Song plays as they exchange lace. To audiences at the time, it looked like a beautiful and authentic Hawaiian ceremony. But many of the details were pure Hollywood invention, designed for visual appeal rather than cultural accuracy. The setting itself was the Coco Palms Resort on the island of Kauai. The resort became incredibly famous because of the film, and for decades after, they offered wedding packages that replicated the movie scene. The lagoon and the specific location were real. However, the tradition of a royal wedding on a floating raft, as depicted, was largely a creation for the movie. While canoes and water were important in Hawaiian culture, this specific ceremony was staged for the camera. The famous double-hulled canoe is another interesting detail. It looks impressive, but its use in this context is more symbolic than historical for a wedding. The canoe itself was part of the Coco Palms Resort's regular entertainment. They used it for a nightly torch lighting ceremony. The film crew simply borrowed it and decorated it with flowers. The idea of the bride and groom floating down a river to their wedding was a romantic image that the filmmakers knew would appeal to mainland American audiences. The song Hawaiian Wedding Song is also not an ancient traditional chant. It was originally written in 1926 by Charles E. King with the title Ke Kali Ne Au. It was a popular Hawaiian song, but it wasn't specifically a wedding song. The English lyrics that Elvis sings were written in 1958 by Al Hoffman and Dick Manning. So, while it became known as the Hawaiian Wedding Song, because of the movie's immense popularity, its origins are in 20th century popular music, not ancient tradition. Even the costumes, while beautiful, were stylized for Hollywood. The exchanging of lace is an authentic and important Hawaiian custom, and the film gets that part right. But the overall presentation was designed to fit a specific romanticized idea of Hawaii that was popular in the 1960s. The film was a massive box office success and had a huge impact on tourism to the islands. It shaped the perception of Hawaii for a generation of Americans. But that perception was based on a carefully constructed fantasy, a beautiful and entertaining one, but a fantasy nonetheless. The wedding scene is a perfect example of this, a mix of some real cultural elements with a lot of Hollywood magic. Number 19, who is the mystery girl in the Bossa Nova Baby video? In the 1963 film Fun in Acapulco, Elvis performs the song Bossa Nova Baby. The scene is set in a crowded nightclub. Elvis is on stage singing and dancing, and the camera frequently cuts to a young, dark-haired woman in the audience who is dancing with incredible energy and enthusiasm. She steals every shot she's in. For years, many fans wondered who she was. She wasn't a main character in the film. Her name was Terry Garr, and she would later become a famous Oscar-nominated actress. At the time Fun in Acapulco was made, Terry Garr was just a teenager. She was a professional dancer trying to make a living in Hollywood. She was hired as an uncredited background dancer for the movie. During the filming of the Bossa Nova Baby number, she was simply supposed to be one of the many dancers in the crowd. But her talent and energy were impossible to ignore. The director Richard Thorpe, who also directed Jailhouse Rock, noticed her immediately. He told the camera operators to keep finding her in the crowd. That's why she gets so many close-ups. She wasn't a featured performer, but she essentially made herself one through her performance. She had no lines. Her role was just to dance. But she did it with such joy and skill that she becomes a central part of the scene's energy. This was one of Terry Garr's very first film appearances. She went on to appear as a dancer in several other Elvis movies, including Viva Las Vegas's and Kissin' Cousins. She was part of a group of young, talented dancers who worked on many of the big musicals of the 1960s. It was a tough job, with long hours and low pay, but it was a way into the industry. Watching the Bossa Nova Baby scene now, it's fascinating to see a future star in one of her earliest roles. You can see the charisma and talent that would later make her famous in films like Young Frankenstein and Tootsie. Her story is a great example of how Hollywood worked. You could be an anonymous face in the crowd one day, and if you had the talent and the luck to catch a director's eye, you could start to build a career. The mystery girl in Bossa Nova Baby wasn't a mystery. She was a future star waiting for her moment. Number 18. Why did Elvis fall down during Rock a Hula Baby? In the film Blue Hawaii, there's a high energy number called Rock a Hula Baby. It's performed at a luau. Elvis is dressed in a red aloha shirt and white pants, surrounded by dancers. He's full of energy, dancing and shaking. Near the end of the song, there's a moment where he spins around and then seems to trip and fall to one knee. He quickly recovers and finishes the song. For a long time, viewers thought this was a mistake, a genuine trip that was left in the final cut of the film. But the fall was completely planned. It was part of the choreography. The dance routines for Blue Hawaii were created by Charles O'Curran. He had worked with Elvis on several previous films, including G.I. Blues and Loving You. He understood Elvis's style of movement and knew how to create routines that looked exciting and a little bit spontaneous even when they were carefully planned. The fall in Rock Hula Baby was a deliberate piece of stagecraft. The move was designed to add a bit of drama and excitement to the end of the song. It makes the performance feel more wild and out of control than it actually was. Elvis was an incredible athlete. He was very coordinated and had great control over his body. A genuine trip like that would have been unlikely. You know, if you watch the scene carefully, you can see that the fall is perfectly timed with the music. He hits the ground on a strong beat in the song. His recovery is also smooth and professional. It's not the clumsy scramble of someone who has actually lost their balance. This kind of planned mistake is a classic trick in performance. It makes the audience feel like they are seeing something real and unscripted. It creates a sense of danger and unpredictability. Elvis was a master of this. His live concerts were full of moments that seemed spontaneous but were often well rehearsed. He knew how to work a crowd and how to create a moment. The fall in Rock-a-Hula Baby is also a nod to his early, more rebellious image. By the time of Blue Hawaii in 1961, his image had been softened considerably. He was a romantic leading man in a travelogue movie. This little moment of losing control was a way to remind the audience of the wild rock and roller he had been. It's a small detail, but it shows how carefully his on-screen persona was managed, even in something that looked like a simple mistake. Number 17 was That Real Champagne in the Got. A Lot of Livin' to Do scene. The musical number Got A Lot of Livin' to Do from the 1957 film Loving You takes place at a party. Elvis, playing a young musician named Deke Rivers, performs the song for a group of teenagers. At one point, someone hands him a bottle of champagne. He shakes it up and sprays it all over the crowd. It looks like a fun, spontaneous moment of rock and roll chaos. But the liquid in that bottle was not champagne. It was ginger ale. Using real alcohol on a film set, especially in a scene like this, was generally avoided for several practical reasons. First, there was the cost. A scene might require multiple takes. Using real champagne for every take would have been expensive. Ginger ale was much cheaper and looked almost identical on camera, especially in black and white, though. Loving You was in Technicolor. The bubbly effect was the same. Second, there were safety and consistency concerns. If the actors, many of whom were young, were actually drinking or being sprayed with alcohol, it could lead to unpredictable behavior and make it difficult to get consistent performances from take to take. The director needed to maintain control of the set. Using a non-alcoholic substitute ensured that everyone stayed professional. Third, there was the issue of the mess. spraying a sticky, sugary liquid like champagne all over the set. The costumes and the actors would create a huge cleanup job. Costumes would have to be dry cleaned between takes. The floor would become slippery and dangerous. Ginger ale was still messy, but it was easier to manage than champagne. This kind of substitution was common practice in Hollywood and still is today. What looks like whiskey is often iced tea. What looks like milk is often a mixture of water and food coloring, because real milk can look strange under the bright studio lights. The job of the prop department is to create a believable reality for the camera, and that often means using fakes and substitutes. The Got a Lot of Living to Do scene is a perfect example of this movie magic. The energy of the performance is what sells the moment. Elvis's charisma makes you believe that he is a rebellious young rock star causing trouble at a party. You don't question whether the champagne is real. The emotion of the scene is authentic, even if the props are not. It's a reminder that filmmaking is an art of illusion. Number 16, why does the guitar in Teddy Bear sound so thin? In the movie Loving You, Elvis performs the hit song Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear. It's a classic performance. He's dressed in a stylish outfit and is surrounded by adoring fans. He's playing an acoustic guitar. But if you listen closely to the soundtrack, the guitar sound is very full and electric. The acoustic guitar he is holding on screen doesn't match the sound you're hearing. This was a common practice in Elvis's movies and in Hollywood musicals in general. The music for the film was recorded in a professional recording studio, radio recorders in Hollywood, several weeks before filming began. In the studio, they used top-of-the-line equipment and the best session musicians. The goal was to create a perfect, polished recording. On the Teddy Bear track, Elvis's lead guitarist, Scotty Moore, played his electric guitar. The Jordanaires provided the background vocals. The sound was carefully mixed and produced to be a hit single. When it came time to film the scene, Elvis was required to lip sync to this pre-recorded track. This was the standard way of doing things. It ensured high-quality sound and allowed the director to focus on the visuals without worrying about capturing a perfect live musical performance on a noisy film set. Elvis was a great live performer, but the conditions on a movie set are not ideal for recording music. The acoustic guitar he holds in the scene is just a prop. It's there to make it look like he is the one making the music. It was chosen for its visual appeal, not its sound. In fact, it's likely the guitar wasn't even mic'd. All the sound the audience hears is from the studio recording. This is why there's a disconnect between what you see and what you hear. You see an acoustic guitar, but you hear an electric guitar, bass, drums, and backing vocals. This technique was used in almost all of his movie performances. Whether he was on a beach in Hawaii or a stage in Las Vegas, the music was almost always pre-recorded. Sometimes the props were more convincing than others, but in the Teddy Bear scene, the difference is quite noticeable. You know, it's a little detail that pulls back the curtain on how these musical numbers were constructed. They were not live concerts. They were carefully staged visual representations of a studio-produced song. Number 15 was Elvis really driving that race car in Viva Las Vegas. The finale of Viva Las Vegas features a thrilling car race, the fictional Grand Prix of Las Vegas. Elvis's character, Lucky Jackson, is a race car driver. The racing sequences are full of high-speed action, with cars spinning out and jockeying for position. We see many shots of Elvis in the cockpit of his car, gritting his teeth and wrestling with the steering wheel. But while Elvis did some of his own driving, the most dangerous and high-speed shots were performed by a professional stunt driver. His stunt double for the driving scenes was a man named Kerry Lofton. Lofton was one of the most respected and prolific stunt drivers in Hollywood history. He worked on hundreds of films, including Bullet, The French Connection, and Dwell. He was a master at his craft. When you see the car from a distance, sliding around a corner at high speed or weaving through traffic, that's Kerry Lofton behind the wheel. The close-up shots of Elvis in the car were filmed using a technique called process photography. The car would be mounted on a trailer or a special rig in front of a large screen. The pre-filmed footage of the racetrack would be projected onto the screen behind him. The camera would film Elvis driving in the stationary car. To make it look more realistic, crew members would rock the car and fans would be used to simulate the wind. This was a very common technique before the advent of modern computer-generated effects. Elvis was a known car enthusiast and a good driver. He was allowed to do some of the simpler driving shots himself, like pulling up to a location or driving at moderate speeds on a straight road. But the studio's insurance company would never have allowed their multi-million-dollar star to perform the dangerous, high-speed stunts. The risk of injury was simply too high. His co-star, Anne Margaret, also had a scene where she drives a car recklessly. She later admitted she was terrified during the filming of those scenes. The car was being towed at high speed, but she still had to act as if she were in control. The process of making these action sequences was a complex collaboration between the actors, the director, the camera crew, and the highly skilled but often uncredited stunt performers who risked their lives to create the thrills on screen. Number 14. What's Wrong with the Puppet Show in GI Blues? In GI Blues, Elvis performs the song Wooden Heart during a puppet show for a group of German children. It's a charming and memorable scene. Elvis is operating a small female puppet while singing the song, which features a mix of English and German lyrics. But there are several small details in the scene that don't quite add up. The most obvious one is Elvis's puppetry skills. When you watch closely, it's clear that Elvis is not the one actually operating the puppet he is holding. His hand movements are not synchronized with the puppet's movements. The puppet turns its head and moves its mouth in ways that don't correspond to what Elvis is doing. The real puppeteer was hidden below the stage, out of the camera's view. This puppeteer was a professional who knew how to bring the character to life. Elvis's role was to hold the puppet and make it look like he was the one in control. This is another example of Hollywood movie magic. It would have taken a lot of time and practice for Elvis to become a skilled enough puppeteer to perform the scene convincingly. It was much more efficient to hire a professional and have Elvis focus on his acting and singing, or in this case, lip syncing. Another interesting detail is the song itself. Wooden Heart is based on a German folk song called Muss I denn. Elvis learned about the song while he was actually stationed in Germany with the U.S. Army. He heard it sung by local musicians. It was his idea to record a version of it for the film. The inclusion of German lyrics was a nod to his real-life experience and added a layer of authenticity to his role as a soldier stationed in Germany. The scene was filmed on a soundstage at Paramount Studios in Hollywood. The German village in the background was a set. The children in the audience were child actors. The entire scene was a carefully constructed fantasy. But it was a fantasy that connected with audiences. The song became a huge hit, especially in Europe. The puppet show scene, despite its technical inaccuracies, became one of the most beloved moments in all of Elvis's films because of its charm and sincerity. Number 13, why is the Follow That Dream beach so empty? The 1962 film Follow That Dream was filmed on location in Florida. The title song is performed by Elvis as his character, Toby Quimper, sits on a beautiful, pristine beach with his family. The beach is completely empty except for them. There are no other people, no buildings, no signs of modern life. This wasn't because the filmmakers found a remote, undiscovered paradise. It was because they created one. The filming took place in areas around Ocala, Inglis, and Yankeetown, Florida. The specific beach scenes were filmed in a place that is now part of the Withlacoochee Gulf Preserve. At the time, the area was relatively undeveloped, but it wasn't completely deserted. Like, the film crew had to go to great lengths to make the beach look untouched by civilization. The production team had to build a temporary road to get their heavy equipment, including cameras, generators, and catering trucks, to the filming location. They had to carefully control access to the area to prevent modern cars or curious onlookers from appearing in the background of a shot. Any signs of modern life, like telephone poles or distant buildings, had to be carefully avoided or hidden by the camera's framing. The state of Florida was very cooperative. They saw the film as a huge opportunity to promote tourism. The governor, Ferris Bryant, even visited the set. The local communities were also very excited to have a major Hollywood production in their area. Many local residents were hired as extras. The result of all this effort is a vision of Florida that is both beautiful and a little bit unreal. It presents the state as a kind of frontier, a place where a family can just pull over and claim a piece of land for themselves. This fit perfectly with the film's theme of individualism and living outside the rules of society. The empty beach wasn't a discovery, it was a construction. It was a carefully crafted image designed to sell a particular kind of American dream, with Elvis as its most famous spokesman. After the movie came out, the area became a tourist attraction, and the Follow That Dream Parkway was named in its honor. Number 12. Did Elvis really play the piano in Wild, in the Country? In the 1961 drama Wild in the Country, Elvis plays a troubled young writer. There's a scene where his character Glenn Tyler sits at a piano and plays and sings the song I Slipped, I Stumbled, I Fell. We see close-ups of his hands on the keyboard, and it looks like he is really playing. Elvis could play the piano, and he often did in his private life and during recording sessions. However, on film, things were often not what they seemed. For this particular scene, the piano playing you hear on the soundtrack was not performed by Elvis. It was played by a studio musician named Dudley Brooks. Brooks was a talented pianist and arranger who worked on many of Elvis's film soundtracks during this period. And he was part of the team of professional musicians who could create the polished sound that the studio wanted. The close-up shots of hands on the piano were likely done by a piano double. This would be a musician whose hands resembled Elvis's. This person would sit at the piano, and the camera would only film their hands while they played along to the pre-recorded music track. These shots would then be edited together with the wider shots of Elvis sitting at the piano and singing. This was a common technique used for any scene that required a star to display a complex technical skill, whether it was playing a musical instrument, painting, or performing surgery. As Elvis was a talented musician, he was a great rhythm guitar player, and his piano skills were good enough for him to work out songs and accompany himself. But he wasn't a virtuoso pianist. The parts written for the film's soundtracks were often more complex than what he would typically play. It was more efficient and produced a better result to have a specialist record the part in the studio. This doesn't take away from Elvis's talent. His contribution was his voice and his performance as an actor. He had to sell the emotion of the scene and make the audience believe that he was the one creating the music. He does this very effectively in Wild, in the Country. The scene is a quiet, emotional moment, and his performance is very convincing. But it's another reminder of the collaborative and often illusionary nature of filmmaking. Number 11, who designed the jumpsuit in Spin Out? In the 1966 movie Spin Out, Elvis performs the song I'll Be Back wearing a very distinctive outfit, a tight, white, double-breasted jacket with matching pants. The look is very sharp and clean. It's not quite the rhinestone jumpsuit he would become famous for in the 1970s, but you can see the beginnings of that style. This and many of Elvis's other 1960s movie costumes were created by a legendary Hollywood costume designer named Bill Thomas. And Bill Thomas was one of the most prolific and respected costume designers in the business. He worked on nearly 400 films and was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, winning one for the film Spartacus. He was known for his elegant and glamorous designs. He worked with stars like Doris Day, Lana Turner, and Kirk Douglas. He was a master of creating clothes that not only looked good, but also helped to define a character. For Elvis's movies, Thomas had a specific challenge. He had to create outfits that were stylish and modern, but also allowed Elvis to move freely during his musical numbers. Well, Elvis was a very physical performer, and his costumes had to be able to withstand a lot of action without tearing or looking sloppy. The white suit in Spin Out is a great example of this. It's tailored to fit him perfectly, accentuating his athletic build. The fabric has just enough give to allow him to dance. The choice of white was also significant. It makes him stand out from the background and the other performers. It has an almost angelic or heroic quality. This was all part of the process of shaping Elvis's image in the mid-1960s. He was moving away from the rebellious rocker image and into the role of a handsome, charming leading man. Bill Thomas's sophisticated costumes were a key part of that transformation. Thomas worked with Elvis on several other films, including Clambake and Speedway. He helped to create the movie star look that defined Elvis in this period. While the films themselves are often criticized for being formulaic, the costume design was always top-notch. The white suit and spin-out is a small detail, but it represents the work of a master craftsman and the careful construction of one of the most iconic images in pop culture history. Number 10. Why are the credits for Jailhouse Rock so strange? If you watch the opening credits for the film Jailhouse Rock, you might notice something unusual. As the names of the actors appear on screen, they are set against a backdrop of dancers' silhouettes moving in a stylized way. This animated credit sequence was not common for a live-action film in 1957. It was the work of a pioneering animation studio and a sign of how MGM was trying to brand the film as something new and modern. The credit sequence was designed by a studio called Playhouse Pictures. This was a small animation house founded by a group of artists who had previously worked for Disney and UPA United Productions of America. UPA was famous for its modern, minimalist style of animation, which was very different from the realistic style of Disney. You can see the UPA influence in the Jailhouse Rock credits. The figures are not realistic. They are stylized shapes defined by their outlines. The movements are jerky and rhythmic, like a modern dance piece. This was a bold choice. It immediately tells the audience that this is not going to be a typical Hollywood movie. It's going to be something with a modern artistic sensibility. It associates Elvis and his music with the cutting edge of graphic design and animation. The use of black, white, and red in the color scheme is also very dramatic and eye-catching. The idea was to capture the energy of rock and roll in a visual way before the movie even started. The dancing silhouettes are a preview of the famous Jailhouse Rock number that will come later in the film. It sets a tone of excitement and rebellion. It was a form of marketing built directly into the film itself. This kind of stylized animated credit sequence would become much more common in the 1960s thanks to designers like Saul Bass, who created iconic openings for films by Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick. But in 1957, it was still quite rare. Playhouse Pictures went on to have a very successful career in television, creating famous animated characters for commercials like the Pillsbury Doughboy and the Keebler Elves. Their work on Jailhouse Rock is an early and often overlooked example of their innovative style, and it's a detail that shows how the film was trying to be modern in every aspect of its production. Number 9. What is the hidden joke in the Speedway duet? In the 1968 film Speedway, Elvis co-starred with Nancy Sinatra. They perform a duet called Fear Ain't Nothing Like a Song. The performance is fun and full of chemistry. At one point in the song, Nancy Sinatra sings a line directly to Elvis, "You're a tiger, so they say." As she sings this, she makes a clawing gesture with her hands. This was a very specific and deliberate inside joke. The line and the gesture were a direct reference to one of Nancy Sinatra's own biggest hit songs. In 1967, she had recorded the theme song for the James Bond film You Only Live Twice. In that song, there is a lyric that goes, "You're a tiger, but you're a kitten at heart." The song was a huge international hit for her. By including a similar line in the Speedway duet, the songwriters and performers were giving a playful nod to her recent success. It was a way of acknowledging that she was a star in her own right, not just Elvis's co-star. By the late 1960s, Nancy Sinatra was a major recording artist with hits like These Boots Are Made for Walkin'. The joke was a sign of mutual respect between two pop music icons. It was a little moment that fans of both artists would have immediately recognized and appreciated. The songwriters for There Ain't Nothing Like a Song were Joy Byers and Bob Johnston. They likely wrote the line specifically for Sinatra to sing. It's a clever bit of writing that adds a layer of fun to the performance. It also helps to create a sense of realism. It feels like two friends teasing each other, which was true to the good relationship Elvis and Nancy Sinatra had off screen. These kinds of inside jokes were common in Hollywood films. They were a way for filmmakers and actors to communicate with their audience and to add a personal touch to their work. The tiger reference in Speedway is a small detail, but it's a great example of how pop culture can fold back on itself. It connects the world of the movie to the real-world careers of its stars, creating a richer experience for the viewer. Number 8 was the Clambake Boat Reel. The 1967 film Clambake features Elvis as a rich heir who swaps places with a poor water ski instructor. A major plot point involves Elvis's character Scott Hayward trying to develop a new super hard boat coating called Goof, which he plans to test in a big speedboat race. The final race is a major action sequence. The boat he drives is a sleek, futuristic-looking speedboat called the Rawhide. The boat was very real, and it had a racing pedigree long before it appeared in the movie. The boat was a custom-built racing boat from the early 1960s. It was designed and built by the famous boat builder Don Aronow, a legend in the world of offshore powerboat racing. The specific model was a Donzi 28. It was known for its speed and handling. The boat used in the film was an actual racing boat that had competed in real events. For the movie, the boat was given a custom paint job, and the name Rawhide was added to its side. The production company, United Artists, rented the boat for the filming. Just like with the race cars in Viva Las Vegas's, the most dangerous high-speed driving was done by a professional stunt driver and boatman, not by Elvis. However, Elvis did film scenes in the boat while it was stationary or moving at low speeds. The use of a real high-performance racing boat added a level of authenticity to the film's climax. The boat looks fast because it was fast. The racing sequences were filmed on location at Biscayne Bay in Florida. The film crew used special camera boats and helicopters to capture the high-speed action. After the film was made, the boat went back to its life as a racing vessel. Its history as a movie star boat made it a unique piece of memorabilia. The story of the Rawhide boat is another example of how Elvis's films, even the light-hearted comedies, often used real, high-performance vehicles to create their action sequences. It shows the level of production value that went into these movies, even if the plots were often simple and formulaic. Number 7, Who Was the Woman on the Blue Hawaii? Album cover. The soundtrack album for Blue Hawaii was a massive success, spending 20 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard charts. The album cover is almost as iconic as the film itself. It features a large close-up of Elvis's face, and next to him, a smaller picture of a smiling woman in a bathing suit holding a ukulele. Many people assume this woman is Joan Blackman, the actress who played Elvis's girlfriend, Male, in the movie. But it is not. The woman on the cover was a model who was hired just for the album cover photo shoot. Her identity remained a mystery to the general public for many years. Her name was Elizabeth Stefaniak. She was a secretary at Paramount Pictures and also did some part-time modeling. She happened to be dating Elvis at the time the album cover was being designed. The photo was taken at the Hawaiian Village Hotel in Waikiki during the filming of the movie. Elvis and Elizabeth were relaxing by the pool. A photographer from RCA Records, the record label, was there to take publicity photos. He snapped the picture of her, and the record company executives later decided to use it for the album cover. They likely chose it because it captured the fun, tropical vibe they wanted to sell. Joan Blackman, the film's co-star, was reportedly not happy about being left off the cover of the best-selling album. It was an unusual decision. Typically, the album cover would feature the film's 2 main stars. The choice to use a picture of Elvis's real-life girlfriend instead was a strange one, and the reasons for it are not entirely clear. It may have simply been that the executives thought it was a better picture. This small detail reveals a little bit about the separation between the film production run by the movie studio and the music production run by the record company. Even though they were promoting the same project, they sometimes made different creative decisions. You know, the Blue Hawaii album cover is a famous piece of pop culture history, and for decades the identity of the woman sharing the cover with the king of rock and roll was a little known piece of trivia. Number 6, why does the return to sender scene look so different? In the 1962 film Girls, 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 Elvis performs the hit song Return to Sender. The scene takes place on a small fishing boat. Elvis and his friends are playing the song for fun. The look and feel of this scene are very different from many of his other movie musical numbers. It's not a big staged performance. It feels much more natural and almost documentary-like. This was a deliberate stylistic choice by the director, Norman Taurog. Taurog was a veteran director who had made many films with Elvis. For this particular scene, he decided to use a different filming technique. Instead of using multiple cameras and carefully planned shots, he used a single handheld camera. This was a technique that was becoming popular in the new wave of European cinema at the time. It created a sense of immediacy and realism. The camera moves around the boat, catching candid moments between the actors. The lighting is natural, not the harsh, artificial light of a soundstage. The actors are not playing to the camera in a theatrical way. They are interacting with each other. The whole scene feels loose and improvised, even though it was scripted. This style was a big departure from the typical MGM-style musical number, like Jailhouse Rock, which was very formal and theatrical. The return to sender scene feels more like a home movie. It makes the audience feel like they are right there on the boat with the characters. The song itself also contributes to this feeling. Return to Sender is a straightforward rock and roll song with a catchy rhythm. It's the kind of song that a group of friends might actually play for fun. It doesn't require a big orchestra or a chorus line of dancers. The simple, realistic setting of the fishing boat is a perfect match for the song's unpretentious style. The scene is a great example of how a director can use different cinematic techniques to create a specific mood. By choosing to shoot Return to Sender in this gritty, realistic way, Norman Taurog created one of the most memorable and authentic feeling musical moments in any of Elvis's films. Number 5. What was the first song Elvis sang on film? Most people might guess that the first song Elvis ever sang in a movie was a big rock and roll number. But his cinematic musical debut was actually a gentle acoustic ballad. The film was his first Love Me Tender from 1956. The song was not the famous title track. The first song his character, Clint Reno, sings in the movie is a simple folk song called We're Gonna Move. The scene takes place early in the film. The Reno brothers have just returned home from the Civil War. The family gathers on the porch of their farmhouse. Elvis, as Clint, picks up an acoustic guitar and sings the song for his family. It's a quiet, understated moment. This was a very careful and deliberate way to introduce Elvis to movie audiences. In 1956, he was still a very controversial figure. Many adults saw his rock and roll music and his stage performances as dangerous and vulgar. The studio, 20th Century Fox, wanted to ease him into the film. They wanted to show a softer, more sensitive side of him before they unleashed the rock and roller. We're Gonna Move is a simple, traditional sounding song. It's about finding a new home and a better life. It presents Elvis not as a rebellious teen idol, but as a wholesome country boy. His performance is sincere and gentle. He's not swiveling his hips or sneering at the camera. He's just a young man singing a song for his family. The famous title song, Love Me Tender, comes later in the film. By the time he sings that, the audience has already accepted him as a sympathetic character. The strategy worked. The film was a huge box office hit. It proved that Elvis could be a movie star. But it all started not with a bang, but with a quiet, gentle folk song on a farmhouse porch. It's a small detail that reveals a lot about how carefully his early film career was managed. Number 4, why was a real DJ in Loving You? In the 1957 film Loving You, there is a scene set at a Texas radio station. A real-life famous disc jockey from that era appears in the film playing himself. His name was Dewey Phillips, and he was a pioneering rock and roll DJ from Memphis, Tennessee. His inclusion in the film was a direct nod to the huge role he played in launching Elvis's real-life career. Dewey Phillips had a radio show called Red, Hot and Blue on station Wichby Q in Memphis. In July 1954, he was the very first DJ in the world to play an Elvis Presley record on the radio. The song was That's All Right. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. The station's phone lines were flooded with calls from people wanting to hear the song again. And Phillips played the record over and over again that night. That radio broadcast is considered by many to be the birth of rock and roll as a mainstream phenomenon. By putting Dewey Phillips in the movie, the filmmakers were adding a layer of authenticity. Loving You is a fictional story, but it's loosely based on Elvis's own rise to fame. Having a real figure like Phillips appear in the film blurred the line between fiction and reality. It was a tribute to the man who had helped make it all happen. In the film, Phillips plays a DJ who is one of the first to give Elvis's character Deke Rivers a chance. It's a small role, but it's a significant one. Phillips was known for his wild on-air personality, and he brings some of that energy to his performance. This was not common practice at the time. It was rare for a non-actor to be given a role in a major Hollywood film, especially playing themselves. The decision to include him shows how important the role of the radio DJ was in the 1950s. They were the gatekeepers of popular music. They could make or break a new artist. The scene in Loving You is a small detail, but it's a fascinating piece of history documenting the connection between a new kind of music and the new media personalities who championed it. Number 3 was The Fight in Kid Galahad Reel. The 1962 film Kid Galahad stars Elvis as a boxer. The film features several fight scenes. Elvis trained for the role with a real-life boxing champion. His trainer and co-star in the film was Mushi Callahan. Callahan was a former world junior welterweight champion from the 1920s and 30s. After retiring from boxing, he became a sought-after boxing technical advisor and coach for Hollywood films. The fight scenes in Kid Galahad are very well choreographed and look realistic. This is because they were designed by a real expert. Callahan taught Elvis the fundamentals of boxing, how to stand, how to punch, how to move. He also worked with the other actors to make the fights look convincing. One of the actors Elvis fights in the film was a young Charles Bronson. Bronson was a tough guy in real life, having been a coal miner and a tail gunner in World War II before becoming an actor. According to some stories from the set, the fight scenes between Elvis and Bronson got a little too real at times. Both men were competitive and athletic. There was a professional rivalry between them. During the filming of one of their fights, some real punches were allegedly thrown and landed. The director, Phil Carlson, had to step in and remind them that they were making a movie. But the tension between them actually adds to the realism of the scenes. When you watch them fight, there's a sense of genuine physical conflict. Elvis took the role very seriously. He was in great physical condition and was a big boxing fan. He had a black belt in karate and was a natural athlete. He wanted the fights to look as real as possible. The collaboration with Mushi Callahan and the on-screen rivalry with Charles Bronson helped to make the boxing scenes in Kid Galahad some of the most convincing of his entire film career. The punches may have been choreographed, but the effort and the intensity were very real. Number 2, who was the real star of the Double Trouble scene? In the 1967 film Double Trouble, there's a scene where Elvis's character, Guy Lambert, is on a stakeout in a house. To pass the time, he sings the song Old MacDonald to a small terrier dog. It's a cute, comedic scene. The dog in the scene often gets as much attention as Elvis. The dog's name in real life was Scamp, and he was played by the same dog who was famous for playing Stitch in the Disney classic Old Yeller. The dog was a professional animal actor. He was trained by the legendary Hollywood animal trainers Frank and Rudd Weatherwax. The Weatherwax family was famous for training Pal, the dog who played Lassie. The dog in Double Trouble was a highly trained performer. When you watch the scene, the dog's reactions are perfectly timed to the song. It barks, it cocks its head, it looks at Elvis with just the right expression. These were all trained behaviors. The dog was responding to off-screen commands from its trainer. This scene is a great example of the unseen work that goes into making a movie. While Elvis is the star, the scene wouldn't work without the skill of the animal actor and its trainer. Getting an animal to perform on cue, take after take, under hot studio lights is incredibly difficult. The choice of the song Old MacDonald is also interesting. It's a simple children's song. It shows a lighter, more playful side of Elvis. By the late 1960s, his films were becoming increasingly formulaic and family-friendly. This scene is a perfect example of that trend. It's not rebellious rock and roll. It's a wholesome star singing a nursery rhyme to a cute dog. For many critics, this was a sign of how far his career had strayed from its exciting origins. But for audiences at the time, it was a charming and entertaining moment. Number one, why was the last shot of Change of Habit so controversial? Elvis's final scripted feature film was Change of Habit, released in 1969. He plays a doctor working in a low-income neighborhood. His co-star is Mary Tyler Moore, who plays a nun working as a speech therapist at his clinic. The film's central conflict is whether she will choose to leave the church to be with him. The very last shot of the film is notoriously ambiguous and has been debated by fans for decades. In the final scene, Elvis is performing the song Let Us Pray in a church. Mary Tyler Moore's character is in the pews looking at him. She is clearly torn between her love for him and her devotion to God. The camera cuts between a close-up of her face and a close-up of Elvis's face. Then, in the very last shot, the two images are superimposed. We see Elvis's face overlaid with an image of Jesus on a crucifix. This final shot is incredibly jarring and strange. The film doesn't give a clear answer to the central question. It ends on this bizarre symbolic image. The filmmakers were trying to visually represent her internal conflict. Is she looking at the man, or is she looking at God? Is there a difference? Is Elvis being presented as a kind of savior figure? The director, William A. Graham, has said that the ending was intended to be open to interpretation. He wanted the audience to decide for themselves what she would do. But the superimposition of Elvis's face onto a religious icon was a very bold and, for some, blasphemous choice. It's a strange end to Elvis's narrative film career. The film itself tried to tackle serious social issues like poverty and autism, but it's often remembered for this one bizarre final shot. It's a detail that shows how filmmakers in the late 1960s were experimenting with more abstract and symbolic visual techniques. It's also a reflection of the almost religious status that Elvis held for many of his fans. The shot is a clumsy but fascinating attempt to capture the complex role he played in 20th century culture, part pop star, part rebel, and for some, something much, much more.